Hey everybody, Dylan Bowman here, one of the founders of Freetrail and the host of the Freetrail podcast. Thank you for watching our video podcast. A couple of things before we get started. Number one, please do join Freetrail Pro, our great community for trail runners from around the world. There's a lot of great perks involved in that membership, and we would love to have you on board. Number two, a big thank you to our sponsors here in the video podcast. We don't do real commercial breaks, so I just want to give them a major shout out on the front end here. We have some discount codes in the show notes that you can take advantage of. Number one, Speedland, of course, the makers of the GS Tam, the shoe that bears the Freetrail logo on it, and a product that we worked on to bring to market in the spring of 2023. Our other annual partner is Gnarly Nutrition, makers of fantastic training and racing nutritional supplements that will really help you on your trail journey. We always have a third partner on the show that rotates throughout the year. So depending on who it is now, you can find a link and a discount code in the show notes for that partner as well. But a big thank you to the sponsors who do make our podcast possible. Number three, last but not least, we would really appreciate it while you're here to smash the subscribe button on the Freetrail YouTube channel. You can also click the bell icon to get notifications whenever we post new content. We are working very hard to keep you inspired, informed, and entertained here in the great sport of trail running. Thank you so much. Enjoy the show. Tyler Green, Rachel Drake, welcome back to the show. Nice to see you both.
Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you.
Beautiful evening there in Les Houches. You guys are, of course, there a few weeks ahead of UTMB and OCC. Maybe quickly first tell us about the decision-making to take the family over there for an extended European vacation.
It's kind of been a dream for a while. And I would give Rachel a lot of credit for being the one who really pushed for that as well. I don't know. I think I can be a little bit more like, oh, it's good. I'm being at home's fine. And it's true. It's like, we love home as well and miss it to an extent, but also it's great being able to like kind of trim all the other stuff, all the other kind of great distractions, but distractions nonetheless, and just be able to run and recover and go and do it again. And in the meantime, hang out with our kid and show him the place as well. So it's great.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit of a business trip. Rachel, do you have anything to add? I mean, vacation mixed with business. I mean, obviously there are goals attached to this little family excursion too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like it's kind of nice because I wanted to do a full Golden Trail series, which means you have to run 3 of the races in the series. And it was just a good impetus to come over and stay over rather than taking multiple international trips. And knowing that UTMB was a big focus for Tyler, I think it just made a lot of sense to make it happen. And I mean, you just never know what's going to happen in life. And if you have the opportunity to do something like that, like, you go and you take it and hope that you get another opportunity, but you just never know if that'll come up again.
Awesome. Well, it looks like you guys have been having a lot of fun, and I want to hear about some of the things you've been up to. But of course, you've both been on the show before, but I've sort of introduced a new tradition that I'd like to propose to you both to open things up and reintroduce you both to the Freetrail listenership. And I figured it would be fun to have you answer for each other, because I think this is an interesting new format here. A married couple who are both professional athletes and who share much of, in common, just in terms of like your life path and being new parents and stuff. And obviously, each other intimately. So asking you the traditional opening question of what makes you, you, but Tyler, I'm going to ask you to answer for Rachel. What are her unique personality traits, character traits, and what makes Rachel special and unique as a human being?
Yeah, I think it comes down to exuberance, and that comes in the form of her running. It comes in the form of her medical practice and research that she's done, or motherhood, just the excitement that she brings into the world and into others' lives. I mean, people who know her, who are listening to this will be like, yeah, that sounds about right. And that is just, it's something that I think sparks other people's excitement about things as well. It's definitely something that, by living with her, I think I've, just grown in my love of life and joy of life. So it's pretty great.
Wow. That's really sweet.
Oh, nice. Rachel, your turn.
I think for Tyler, like the thing that really, I don't know, that really stands out to me is just like how real and honest he is. Like if something is good or bad, he will just call it like it is and doesn't try to sugarcoat things. Which is really, really amazing because, you know, when he tells you that he loves you or he's proud of you or that you can do something, it's real. He's not just using superlatives to try to be, you know, optimistic or something, but it's just, I feel like the words that you use carry a lot of weight because they're true. And I think your high school athletes see that, your adult athletes see that. And that's why we, you know, like to be around you because we know that what we're getting is real.
Wow. What a great place to start. Look at this. We're basically like renewing your vows here on the podcast. Let's start with parenthood. Obviously, we're both sort of going through this journey at the same time. And we were just talking before we pressed record that it's my son's first birthday, which means it's Lewis's first birthday is coming up very soon. Talk about this new chapter of your lives. And maybe Rachel, we can start with you. Like, how have things changed and how have things stayed the same, you know, in motherhood?
Yeah. Well, I want to preface all of this by saying I love being a mom and it's really, truly the best thing that's ever happened to me, but it has come with a lot of challenges. I mean, I loved being pregnant. I loved our little guy. But returning to running postpartum has been extremely challenging. Getting injured, I mean, as any runner knows, is really, really hard and can be dark. And I think having to go through that kind of coupled with all of the joy of having this wonderful new human in your life is kind of interesting to have both at the same time. I think the running side of things has just been really hard. And a big part of my identity is with running and being able to express myself through running, and losing that for a long time has been challenging. Yeah.
So maybe going a little bit deeper, because I know it's sort of, you identified the fact that it was going to be a little bit more challenging maybe than you expected at Orcas at the beginning of the year. I think it was in February where you didn't finish the 50-kilometer race. I think it was your first race back postpartum. Maybe talk about that race and like dropping out and sort of like how it reframed how you were thinking about returning to your running.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that I was doing everything right. Like I worked with a pelvic floor physical therapist. I thought that we were being really conservative with my mileage. I felt like, you know, I'm working harder than I've ever worked to run less miles than I've ever run in terms of, you know, doing physical therapy and lifting and all that stuff. Going into Orcas, sorry, there's a plane flying overhead.
That's fine.
Going into Orcas, I started having some back pain that just kind of felt like, you know, post long run or post ultra, you know, back pain, like some achiness. And it just really got bad in the race. And I knew I was like, I cannot keep running on this. So I dropped out, and I was pretty convinced something bad was going on, and got answers to that really quickly, that I had a sacral stress fracture. And yeah, that obviously set me back to, you know, kind of ground zero, just thinking like, okay, I need to be even more conservative. Then I started seeing, you know, Matt Walsh, who we all know and love. I found out I was deficient vitamin D, which seems like a no-brainer because we're living in Portland and there's, you know, it was winter and I wasn't taking vitamin D. How silly is that? So there were all these little things that I was missing. And I feel like as hard as it was, like we learned a lot of lessons, and I'm now able to apply that to my current training. And I think that's been a good, you know, in the end, I want to put an optimistic, positive spin on things. And as dark as it was, I think that it's been a good journey.
So like as a scientifically oriented person, you know, for the audience, what's the correlation there between being postpartum and having bone injury? Because I think you also said, you know, women who are postpartum can also be susceptible to bone injuries because of breastfeed, something like that too?
Yeah. Your bone density actually goes down when you're nursing, which I didn't know about that. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, well, I've been carrying around all this extra weight. Surely my bones are going to be stronger or something. But your bone density actually goes down for as long as you're nursing and doesn't come back. I think it's until like maybe 6 months postpartum that they've shown that it recovers. So it makes sense. You're losing calcium in the breast milk. I also started taking a calcium supplement. There's no data to show that helps, but maybe it does. And then the other thing is just anatomically, delivering a child and carrying a child, like all of that is going to change your biomechanics. And so I think just like the way that my body was moving was different, and the stress that was being put on my bones was different than pre-pregnancy. So I think all of that coupled together, a little bit different gait, low bone density, you see it all the time. Like so many women have had, bone stress fractures or bony injuries postpartum. So it's like, we really need to be talking about it more, because even as someone who thought they were doing it all right, who was studying it, like I still, Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I think it is something that needs to be talked about more. And, even for me, it's really, fascinating to learn about too. And I think as somebody who, is still competing at a super high level, there's a lot of moms who have proven that you can bounce back from delivering children and be, still competing at the top of the sport. And, it just is not easy, and it's not necessarily intuitive, that like acute comeback period. So the more we can enlighten the world, the better. Tyler, let's talk about how this has been for you. I mean, this has obviously been a big period of change too. I know in addition to being a father now, there was a decision to kind of step back from your job as a teacher and make a deeper investment in your own athletic career and in your coaching career. Can you talk about that thought process and, whether there are any conflicting emotions?
It's been, I look at our life, if last year I was continuing to teach and we had the baby and I was still coaching my individual athletes and my high school athletes and then continuing to run as hard as I want to run, something would have had to give. And so it was good that I was able to leave my position at the school, to be able to go fully into running was the idea of it. But, as a parent or with that parent or with the new added, aspect of parenthood, that became my full priority. And then, I think running was still kind of the secondary piece of it. But I think there's a point in which it keeps me grounded and not going and just training as hard as I possibly could and overcooking myself. Like it's always good to have those other things that kind of tie down your running a little bit and make it more a piece of your life and not your whole life. So I think that's been it's been a great balance. I mean, even on this trip, early on in this trip, we just looked at one another and we were like, this wouldn't be as much fun without Lewis.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so fun having him around, and the way that we can interact with locals in a different way, with Lewis being the kind of conduit to that is just, it's so fun. I think because Rachel and I both share our athletic endeavors and are very much, her challenges in running or the injury, like I feel that just as much. And so there is that tension with like Trans Gran Canaria, which we did in February, was a really that big example of this, of her being fully injured. Like she's walking around with her trekking poles, and that was a really, really like not a fun trip for her. Yeah. As I was able to go and do runs and explore the island. And just, I think recognizing the pain that she was in as best I can. I don't know if I'm the most empathetic person in the world, but hopefully able to feel some of the difficulties that she experienced there. That's just something that we work through and within our relationship and how we go about sharing the role of parenthood or of parents to Lewis.
Yeah, I've always found that to be an interesting dynamic, and couples who are both sort of professional athletes, when one person's having, a moment of positivity and the other's having a moment of negativity, about how you manage to navigate those. And I'd like to talk about Trans-Gran Canaria in a little bit, but Tyler, also, I'd love to hear you talk about, just the thought process of kind of leaving the security of this long-term career you had in Portland as a teacher at the exact moment that your child was born, more or less. And, whether or not that was maybe Rachel could comment on this too, because I'm sure you guys had a lot of conversations together about what was best for the family.
Yeah, I mean, I think to an extent, we're kind of like, okay, how is this going to work for the next 1 or 2 or 3 years, and not seeing the big picture of I need to retire out of this particular position. But Rachel it also fit fairly well in that we were planning on Rachel's going to be finishing medical school and going off to residency. And that means I would have likely been leaving my current position, or my position at the time, in teaching. So it just it felt like a good time to be able to pull the plug on teaching for the time being. And, when I talked with my head of the middle school, she said, you can come back to teaching. It doesn't have to be a once and forever thing. And she was extremely encouraging with that decision as well. So yeah, it was serendipitous, I guess. Just the timing felt right with it. And then actually I think maybe 2 weeks after I told her that I wouldn't be coming back the next year, that's when we found out we were pregnant. And, and I was like, can we put the brakes on this?
Yeah.
And then took some time and said, okay, with this new added.
Yeah.
I feel like you were really more nervous after we found out we were pregnant about leaving your position.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was a little bit more actually, this is a really good time to do that, because we're going to be able to be with the baby. And otherwise, a lot of that, I just don't know how people are able to maintain 2 jobs and raise a small child. I just
it's unless you have really serious help and family that lives nearby. It's a lot more than you really understand until you're
yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Rachel? I think this is interesting too. It's almost like your guys' trip to Europe. It's we never know what's going to happen in life, right?
Absolutely.
Tyler, this is your chance to sort of go all in on your running career and your coaching business. And it isn't the end necessarily if you do want to go back to classroom teaching. I'm sure there was a lot of conversations that you guys had to sort of arrive at that understanding, but I'm sure it's been a fun, freeing new chapter for you both.
Yeah,
in so many ways.
It's been good.
Rachel, where are you at with your professional career now? Last time you were on the show, I think you were just wrapping up your MD, PhD program. So tell us where you're at.
I have 8 weeks left, and I'll pretty much graduate in December. And I'm applying to residency programs right now.
And what does that look like?
So I'm applying into anesthesiology, and it's a 4-year training program. Which anybody who is in medicine knows that residency is pretty darn intense. So it'll be interesting. We've been talking about sort of what running's going to look like during that time. And, obviously I want to keep running, but I think obviously the big priority is going to be to get good medical training. So, I think that's kind of
And for the residency, application process, is that where you get matched with school and you sort of stack rank where you would like to go the most, and somehow they pair you up with a place that might need somebody of your skill set?
So the programs also rank all of the applicants, and then there's an algorithm that matches applicants and programs. So ideally you get one of your top picks, but you could kind of go anywhere.
And do you have any idea of where you might end up at this point, or is it too early to tell?
It's hard to say. We want to be in, places that have good trails, but also good anesthesiology residency programs. And I think some of those places are OHSU, University of Washington, University of Utah,
and a couple Bay Area schools too.
Oh yeah, UCSF and Stanford, of course. UC San Diego. If there's any residency program directors listening, if I don't name your school, it doesn't mean I don't want to go there. I'm just maybe having a blank right now.
Send a DM. Anyway, yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
There is kind of a courting that goes on between applicants and programs. Like, love letters are sent. Yeah. You're like, really want to come to your program? Or I've heard of programs even saying that to applicants. So it makes sense. You want people who are going to be happy wherever your program is, and vice versa.
Yeah. All right. So let's come back and talk about Trans-Gran Canaria. Tyler, you started your season there. Unfortunately, Rachel was banged up at that time, but you had a really strong third place finish. It felt like sort of like your big European breakthrough, more or less. It's sort of a theme that we've had on the show, is just kind of like the learning curve. Sometimes it takes for many of us to like go over to Europe and get our feet wet and figure it out before you can really like race to your potential. And it felt like you did there at Trans-Gran Canaria. Tell us a little bit about how that went and whether my characterization feels accurate to you.
Yeah, that felt like a really solid race. I mean, I was looking back at my training recently, and I'm like, there wasn't anything like really eye-popping in it, especially when I'm like in so deep in training right now. And that feels like, okay, this is where I'm kind of getting to like the limits of my training. But the execution of the race, and just, I think it was more than anything, just a huge confidence booster. I mean, the plan all along this year has been to do a pretty mountainous race early on. And then as I train for Western States, kind of simultaneously have an eye on UTMB as well. And that worked really well because I also needed to work on being in the mountains at Western States. So it was kind of a concurrent training plan there. But yeah, I mean, Trans-Gran Canaria, I mean, it was I think I felt like everything that it threw at me, I was able to rise to the occasion and stay sharp the entire race and engaged, especially late in the race when I think Roko Nublo, that high point of the trail. That's when I could see people behind me, but I could also see that like I was starting to catch a couple people, and just felt like, okay, I'm very much in this. And I guess the other piece of it that was really important for me is I kind of went back and forth I talked with Courtney about this before the race, and I was like, I don't know if I should like kind of do my normal, like start slow sort of thing or what. And she's like, you need to just go for it. And
she was like, I don't want to see you. She said, I don't want to see you at all tomorrow. Didn't you say that?
Which is, you're having a very good race if that happens.
That's a challenge. Yeah.
So I went out and, little over 6-minute pace in the first 3 or 4 miles, and just and found myself like running with guys that were top 10ers at UTMB last year. And it was like, oh, I actually feel pretty good in this group. And then past them, and I'm like, oh, I feel really good or even running faster than this group. So I think those are all real good confidence boosters that I bring to them. I still don't feel like I'm going into UTMB with like this huge amount of confidence that I can just knock it out of the park. I know that you have to come here with a little bit of humility as well. But I look at how that race went and say, I can run with people who've been in the top 10 at UTMB, who've been in the top 5 at CCC. Like, I can run with these guys, and I don't know for sure if that'll happen in a few weeks, but I'm going to go for it.
Yeah. And, Trans-Gran Canaria is sort of like the middle ground, I feel like, between a Western States and a UTMB, just in terms of the terrain. It's faster than UTMB, but like not quite as fast as Western States. So I don't know. It just does feel like a good stepping stone for you and a good confidence boost of performing in Europe. I want to come back to what you said about the training for Western States and how you were kind of looking ahead towards UTMB in a sec. But maybe Rachel, coming back to you, talk about a little bit more about you were diagnosed with this sacral stress fracture, which I'm sure was kind of devastating as you were trying to make your return to running post-pregnancy.
I was feeling good too. I was like, "Ooh, I'm feeling good. Maybe a little too good."
I kind of recall Tyler saying something like that to me. I can't remember where I saw you guys, but he was like, "Yeah, like Rachel's on fire right now." And yeah, it was a bummer to see, but it did seem like, you did the right things and you bounced back, got back to the place where you could be active again with some patience. So maybe tell us about that process and, anything you learned along the way.
Yeah, I think I tried to really play it safe in that return to running. Really, I tried to quiet any voices of, keep my circle really small and talk to Tyler, talk to my physical therapist, Matt Walsh, and Keely pretty much. And I was like, okay, team, I'm consulting with just these few people. And yeah, I think I took at least 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks completely off. But as soon as I could start working on things, I was working on things. So really, really small movements, walking uphill on the treadmill kind of slowly, running on the Alter G, again, just trying to have, this is the attitude that I had when I was returning to running was I want to see how good I can be and do everything right and work really hard and not have any excuse of, oh, well, I'm doing something else. And so I can only dedicate so much to my running. Mm-hmm. I wanted to really be disciplined with it. And I feel like I just tried to apply that mentality to coming back and being healthy. And I think so far it's been working really well. And just every single race that I'm doing, it's I unlock another key of okay, I've been working on that in training and it's feeling so much better than it did a few weeks ago. So yeah, I think we're on the right path.
So then you and Caitlin Gerben, if I'm remembering it correctly, walked the 25K at Canyon. So you were sort of thinking ahead about getting your qualification and your stones for OCC later in the season. What were the considerations there? How were you balancing what's smart for me versus putting yourself in a position to have optionality?
Right. Well, I knew we were going to be living over here at that time. So I really wanted to do one of the UTMB races. And I, again, talked to my small circle of advisors and I said, is this okay for me to walk this? And Matt, our PT said it was okay. And if he had said, no, I think that's a dumb idea, I would not have done it. So I think just it's just been so key to have people in your corner that you really trust and that you actually listen to.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, let's come back and talk about what you have done, because you have been sort of slowly, steadily progressing. You've done a lot of shorter distance races, including Sears and All last weekend ahead of OCC coming up here in a couple of weeks. But coming back to you, Tyler, in Western States, man, you're just so freaking impressive, man. You're just,
isn't he?
Such a stud, man. And I think it's really instructive to, that you can do it in multiple different ways. And I want to talk about that in a sec, but maybe let's start with why you decided to do it again. As somebody who had finished 3 years in a row, you went 14th, 2nd, 4th, and it would have been a good opportunity to maybe just focus on UTMB or to take a step back from Western States after 3 solid ones in a row. Why'd you decide to go back?
It's so hard to not go back. I mean, when you have an entry in there and it's just become over the years, it just starts to become a family. You see the same people, and I just love the process of it all. I love this month by month, the changes and the feelings of fitness that you get. And then also I'm coaching track. And so I have to like kind of pull back my training. And then once track is done, then I have my big like training camp. Like it's all kind of mapped out for what works for me. And I love sitting in the sauna.
Didn't need that this year.
Yeah, you didn't need it, but you still do it, right? I mean, all of those, it's just that step-by-step thing of like leading up to the race. And yeah, and then the race itself. I mean, I was telling Rachel, like just when you know a course so well, you don't like I don't look at my watch at all that entire day. Because I'm like, I know what's coming next. And I get excited about the next part of the course and stuff. Like just that journey step by step has become really special for me. And there's so many memories along the trail. So that's the big one. I mean, like I wouldn't say it's like I have to go and win this thing. But I do feel like I get a lot out of myself, and that's really exciting as well.
Like regardless of where you place, you unlock, it's like the place almost doesn't even matter, because it's like, oh, I ran this differently this year, and that was really satisfying.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. But first I want to go back to what you said about your training, because I thought that was really interesting. You're, of course, I think you still work with Matt Lay, right?
Yeah.
So you did the Western States UTMB double last year, and I'm sure you had some learnings about that you probably felt you could improve upon. You finished 4th at Western States last year, and then had kind of a tough one at UTMB. You finished, but not quite a Tyler Green trademark race. I don't think I'm offending you in giving it that characterization, but
no, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, like another, just you smashed it at Western States, but I'd love to hear you talk about how you and Matt identified like how you might adjust the training to put you in a good position to not only perform well at Western States, but also a couple months later at UTMB. What did that look like?
Yeah, it's just a lot more. I mean, we had a little bit of like kind of flatter threshold work, which I think is important for Western States, but it was a lot more like hill reps and getting strong with climbing, with the intention of I'm going to really work hard in the canyons, and I'm not going to lose a bunch of time going up to Robinson Flat, which I did successfully. And I remember last year I guess 2022, I got into Robinson Flat, and like my crew later on told me like that they just thought I didn't look good. Like I just felt a little bit ragged going into there, and I recognized I didn't feel good in the high country, and maybe that's a little bit of altitude. I know it's not a crazy amount of altitude or anything like that, but we got there a week early and got a little bit of acclimatization in. So just those little things like that. But I think mainly it was just like, I'm just going to do a lot more climbing. And so the process races that I did, I had the choice between doing daybreak racings, Tillamook Burn 50, or doing the Tiger Claw 50 mile. And I chose the Tiger Claw 50 mile. And I was like, gosh, this is going to be a really hard day. It ended up being 90 degrees. So hotter than Western States this year. And it's 6 climbs of, I think, 2,500 feet each, climbing the same mountain 6 times. And that was my preparation for especially being in the high country and recognizing like, hey, that's half of UTMB. And I actually ran that really strong. That was a really big confidence booster for me for the high country. And as you know, like when I hit the high country, I mean, I think the snow was super fun. Like, I think it comes with, you have to kind of bring the right perspective into that. But I really enjoyed being in the snow and being up front and running with all those other guys and saying like, all right, I'm doing what I set out to do. The other thing that Matt really had me do, which is more towards Western States and less towards UTMB, is like, we would just do these hard hill workouts or mountain workouts where he's just like, you get 2 minutes to warm up and then you're hammering up this hill like a Hunchback Mountain. So like a 2,500 foot climb without any recovery. And that's just to get ready for like the escarpment. Not that I'm going to be hammering up it, but let's get going right away.
Yeah. Okay.
And that made the escarpment feel, like an easy climb where I wasn't like already 10 minutes back and trying to claw myself back.
And then it probably puts you in a better position once you recover for Western States to just be ready to stack climbing volume for UTMB. I want to ask you both about this change in strategies, because I've found it just like so inspiring. And we talked about it on the track in your finish line interview, and you said that it was very much an intentional thing, that you wanted to walk off the track that night knowing that you had gone for it. And all day, Corinne and I were talking about like, man, like, Tyler's typically not in the mix until after the river crossing. And that's when he's really like starting to, move into that sort of podium contention area. But you were in second place, like very early. So I want to hear you both just like talk about that strategy, Tyler, just sort of like how you arrived at wanting to sort of change things up in your fourth running at Western States, and then Rachel, any sort of conversations that you guys had leading up to it that might be illuminating.
I'll be curious to hear what she has to say here.
Actually, Dylan, you play a big role in this. So Tyler, I feel like he would say things like, I don't even know if I can be top 10. Like there's so many good guys, on the list this year. And I was like, oh, and then also when it was starting to be cold, I think you started saying, oh, I feel like it needs to be hot for me to do well there because I'm so good at managing myself in the heat. And I kind of was just like, oh, and then the other thing was he wasn't sure that he could like go out hard and stick it. And I reminded him of what you forced him to do with the Wonderland Trail in 2020 COVID year. Dylan set the Wonderland FKT by like an hour and a half. I think it was Ryan Gelfie's record.
Yeah.
And then that was 5 days before Tyler's scheduled attempt. He, of course, didn't get any sleep that night. And then he has to change his goal to be an hour and a half faster than he thought he was going to have to run it. So he had to go for it from the start. And he was able to, I don't know how, it was amazing, but like he was able to sneak under your time. And I just reminded him of that. Like, you've done this before. You did this at Trans Gran Canaria. You did this with the Wonderland Trail. Like you can race aggressively and stick it. So I feel like that was a pretty critical like piece of data for you to have to know like, okay, maybe I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I that's what I was expecting her to say, is just like, it was a lot of me doubting and her. And like, I know Keely multiple times was like, you need to be up front way earlier. You can't let like a half an hour go away like that. And Matt Lay as well, just people like in my corner saying I could do it, like believe in yourself and go give it a shot. Cause you've been second, you've been fourth, like
you got nothing to lose.
I don't know for sure if I'm going to go next year or not. Like you have nothing to lose. So see what can happen if you take a different approach.
Wow. That's so cool, man. I'd love to also maybe have both you, because to me, when I watch you race, Tyler, and then even like afterwards on the track, there's this sense of like calm that you have in aid stations and stuff, where it just feels like you're always in control. Like you never let things spiral, more or less. I don't know if you feel like that's accurate. And if you do feel it is, like, what do you do to sort of like put yourself in that Zen mindset to sort of keep composure throughout races that do have a lot of consequences attached to them?
Yeah. I mean, Western States in particular, I feel like it's just, there's something about it that just brings me into a flow state. And I think that has to do with like it's a challenge, but I also like know that I have the skills to rise to that challenge. I think, and I know this is something that I think probably you've influenced for me as well, is like doing like some like mindfulness meditation of just being in the moment and learning and when I find myself kind of spiraling out of control or something like that, I can come back to the present moment and be like, I don't need to think about what the finish line is going to look like and what place I'm going to be in. I need to think about what's happening right now and how I'm feeling. Am I managing things. And usually, and if I take stock of like how I'm actually feeling, it's usually kind of okay, which I think is like one of the meditations that your brother had on like mountain biking or something like that I remember. And I've told my high schoolers this multiple times about just like, yeah, I can't think about how I got to climb this entire mountain with my legs burning and my lungs burning. But if I think about like how this current pedal stroke feels right now, it's actually okay. Like I can manage that. I just can't manage it all at once, thinking about all that I have to do.
All right. So Rachel, this is perfect. I want to have you chime in about this also, specifically as it relates to those last few miles, because Anthony Costales was making up time on you. He was in third place. You were in second. And Rachel jumped in to be your pacer from Pointed Rock. So for the final 5 or 6 miles. And that's sort of one of those moments where, you know, you could get discouraged or, you know, choke in a situation like that if you don't have kind of a calmer disposition and, you know, some confidence that you will be okay. So Rachel, anything you want to add about Tyler's performance in Western States and maybe specifically about that episode with Anthony chasing you guys down?
Yeah. Well, I want to say we love Anthony. He's such a good guy. I think knowing what Tyler told me before the race about how he wanted to run the race and how he did run it up until Pointed Rocks where I picked him up. I wanted to like basically hold him to what he said he wanted, which was to run every step of that, you know, the climb from No Hands Bridge. And also, you know, now that you mention it with like things spiraling, it was like, okay, Anthony made up 5 minutes on Tyler over, I don't know, 10 miles or so. And I told Tyler that, and he's like, is it really 5 minutes though? Or like, are you lying to me? Because I have lied to him before about those things. I was like, no, it's 5 minutes. And then we got down to the river and we heard it had cut down to like 3 minutes. And so I think a lot of people in that situation, you're in so much pain, you want to be done. It'd be easy to kind of choke and be like, oh, I can't, he's going to get me.
I'm like, it's still third place. No big deal. That's still an awesome
It's still
day.
really good.
We got to Roby Point and Anthony's like Chico State buddies were all up there and they're like, enjoy it, man. He's not coming. And Rachel's like, don't listen to them. I was like, no, I think they're actually like, I don't think they're lying to us, but we kept pushing until,
but
until that last time.
Again, it's not just about like not getting caught. It's not about the place. It's about like knowing that you really like, you pushed every step of the way and you really did. Like you gave everything that you could kind of regardless of whether there was someone closing in on you. And yeah, I think that's like really what we're proud of is the effort as a whole. And it's not just the second place.
Yeah, it was so beautiful too at the finish line, you know, carrying Lou across the finish line. And I think you said something also about like how last year you had found out that Rachel was pregnant or something. And this year you've got Lewis on your shoulders and, you know, just how much the race has sort of meant to you guys and your little family. And, you know, it's been part of, you know, the story of your career in a lot of ways, even as so many things have changed, including the expansion of the family. I wanted to ask you also, I was listening to David Roche and Megan Roche's podcast last week, where they said something about the fact that they were sort of speculating, but I think they were sort of observing in some of their athletes that they had recovered more quickly from Western States because it was less hot. And so basically their speculation was they think people might be able to execute the Western States UTMB double more effectively. Of course, people who are listening to this will know that it's hard for professional athletes to nail those two races in the same summer. So I wondered if you had noticed something.
Women have done fine.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Men especially. But I wondered if you had experienced that, if you felt like maybe you had bounced back from Western States, even though it was a huge PR, you ran faster than you have on the course, low, what was it, 15:05 or something like that?
Yeah, I think, I think the bigger thing for us has been this time around. Well, so in 2021, it was a couple weeks later that I decided like, oh, I'm going to do TDS. So it was just more of like, might as well try to do something. And I was able to get the okay from our school to leave a little bit, or to arrive at like started the school meetings a little bit late. And the same thing with last year. I was going to do CCC, and then I was like, no, I should just do the UTMB. Like, if you want to like train to do well at UTMB, you might as well just do the whole course rather than like kind of have these stepping stones. That was my thought process at the time. And this time it's like from the start, it was, I want to do both of these and I want to do both of them well. And so that's meant like this time around I'm doing workouts, and before it was just like go and run. And,
but do you think you recover better from Western states because it was cooler this year?
That was the question.
Yeah, that was the question.
I mean, I feel like I've recovered pretty well from Western states the other years too.
Yeah. Because there are
answer that question.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, because there are a lot of people who are doing both, between both the men's and women's races. And so I just think that'll be an interesting storyline for people to follow, because I think typically you would sort of look at people like you or like Esther, who finished second in the women's race, and be like, they may be a little bit banged up still from Western states. The courses are so different. And so I don't know. I just think it'll be interesting to see if that reduction in like the oppressive heat at Western states does improve like the body's ability to bounce back.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see.
I was running with Emily Schmitz, Esther's Hoka teammate, this morning. She's like, I think Esther's going to crush UTMB this year. So I'm really excited to see how that all goes down.
She's also in the mom category, which is a perfect segue to come back to you, Rachel. So you did Broken Arrow, you did Dolomites last weekend, you did Sierras and all. So maybe just sketch the arc of your season so far since you've sort of returned from injury, how your body's feeling, how things have been progressing.
Yeah. I also did the uphill race at Tiger Claw, just up to Tiger Mountain. So I feel like, that first one, these are all, sanctioned by my advisory committee. That was really just like, okay, I want to just stand on a start line and, just experience a race. And then Broken Arrow, it was like, okay, let's experience a more competitive race. Let's work on fueling. I'm not necessarily like racing each of these races all out, but like trying to sort of rediscover components of a good race within each one. And I think by the time Dolomites came around, it was like, okay, I can actually race this now. I knew that my training wasn't great going into it. And I felt really good most of the race. I kind of struggled on the steep climb from like 3K to 8K. I think you climb.
That's like the big
really
cool from hell.
Yeah, it's a big climb. I think I lost like 13 positions or something like that. I was just really struggling. Mm-hmm. But then it's a really technical descent, which is something that I've been kind of working on with Matt. And I did well on that descent. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence. Like, okay, if I can descend at Dolomites, like I can descend on anything, because it's just kind of choose your own adventure, downhill, rocky running. And then going into Sierras and all, I felt like for the first time, I wasn't sort of repulsed by, like, I wasn't nervous in terms of like, I don't really want to start this. I don't know how this is going to go. I was genuinely like, I'm excited for this. I knew my training had been really good since Dolomites. I recovered well from Dolomites. I was just excited to see where I was at, and I felt super strong for most of it. I think I could use a little bit of Tyler's Zen, like when things aren't going well, to just slow down and like at least slow down in your mind and think, okay, like how do I actually feel? What can I control right now? Try to just keep moving forward and not catastrophize. Cause when I finished the race, I thought I was in like 30th place. And then I got a text from my mom and she was like, good job, sweetheart. 19th is really good. And I was like, thanks, Mom. Like 19th is pretty good. Like for where I'm at, I feel like 19th at Sierras Zenal is like substantially better than 22nd at Dolomites. It's more competitive. And The other cool thing about that race is they have bonuses for time, like if you run under a certain time. And so even though I felt like my place goal had gone out the door, I was like, oh, well, if I run, 8-minute miles for the next 5 miles, I'm going to get under their slowest time bonus. And so I just started pushing a little bit. And that ended up being like a really good impetus to like, not to keep racing and not just kind of give up. So, yeah.
So, obviously like after a sacral stress fracture, there's probably some fear, like probably takes a little bit of time to like build trust back into your body. And so you're probably building that confidence and trust with all these shorter races that you've been doing. How is that sort of mapped to your training also? Because I'm sure there's also, and I'm pretty sure Tyler helps you with that stuff, if not acts as your coach. So talk about how you guys sort of come to formulate whatever the training prescription is and like how you balance it with how you're feeling in this return to running postpartum.
I think we get a lot of data from the races. So like after Dolomites, I was like, I didn't feel strong with sustained climbing. And so we took that information into the next training block, and he's like, okay, let's do some threshold climbs. And obviously, being near Mont Blanc, there's lots of great places to climb. And so I really focused on that. And that really showed at Sierra Zinal. And so, I think that's such a fun thing about the sport. Like you put the hard work in, you address deficiencies, and then you improve if you can stay healthy.
So, it's only been a couple of days since Sierra Zinal, and you only have maybe 2.5 weeks now, I guess, until OCC. What was the data that you collected at Sierra Zinal, and how might that influence the final couple days of training? You probably don't have a lot.
Yeah. I think just like honing some like faster, flatter running, which there isn't a ton of that in OCC, but like, I feel like the climbing and the descending is great. But when in Sierra Zinal, when it got flat, there's these people, I swear they're passing me. I was like, are you guys running like a 5K or something? Cause like they were just blowing by me. And I think it's not just a fitness thing. It's also a postpartum, like I need to get strong at like a higher cadence. And I had a virtual appointment with Matt today where we're talking about this, and he gave me a lot of great things to work on for like, okay, so as you run faster, your body, like neuromuscularly, you have to be able to tell all of these muscles to fire in the correct sequence. And like, we might need to retrain your body to do that after having a child, because though I ran throughout my pregnancy, I wasn't doing speed and my anatomy is different now. And so I think that's just it's been like a really kind of cool journey trying to figure everything out again.
Tyler, I'm sure you probably are self-conscious at times about like giving this a training load to your wife and the mother of your kid that might be too much or too little. It's sort of a high pressure situation. Anything you want to add about Rachel's return and how you've been there in support as her coach, more or less?
I think being here has really helped in that, like the days in a sense kind of bleed into one another. And so we don't need to be like, okay, we're going to do our workouts on Wednesdays. Wednesday is the workout day. We'll call it Workout Wednesday, right? Like you can do your workout when you're ready to. And if she needs an extra day of recovery, she can get her extra day of recovery. And, I think like the training plan that we've written up together is very loosely, it's like, well, I'm thinking we're maybe going to do this type of workout this day because I'm hoping we can touch on all of these things. But after Sierras and all, like, I think we can kind of pull away from some of the threshold work, like climbs, and work on a little bit more, like, I don't know about on the track, but, going out on maybe
just higher turnover,
or just finding ways to practice the things that she needs to practice. So it's just a little bit more like, okay, from day to day, or how are we going to look at these next 3 days? When are you recovered? Like it'd probably be, this is 2 days. So at least another day before we start to like get some more quality work in possibly, but if she needs another day, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that path between Les Houches and Chamonix might be the perfect place for you to do your flatter tempo stuff there, Rachel.
It's not that flat.
Not that flat. Not that flat.
That's what we're all saying.
Not it. As flat as it gets in that part of the world. Cool. Well, we can start winding down here and sort of talk a bit about, Tyler, what you've been up to in training and maybe what you learned from UTMB last year, how you think you can improve. I'm sure there's a ton that you feel like you can improve from your UTMB finish from last year. So I looked at your Strava and it looks like you are in the thick of it, man. And you're probably winding down now. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So tell us sort of like what you and Matt have been working on, the mix between volume and intensity and climbing and how you're feeling more or less.
Yeah. It was hard because I'd had a big week the week before last, but I was also sick and still managed to be able to train pretty well. We just had a bad cold come through.
Baby
the whole family. Yeah. Baby sickness, perhaps. Yeah, I feel really confident in like the last 4 weeks time in Italy as well. Like that's all been just great, strong climbing and have put some intensity into that as well. But that being said, like, I think, and I say this with Western States and I'll say it with UTMB is like, everybody comes in like fitter than they've ever been in their lives. Right. And then it comes down to execution. And that is something that I think just having gone around the mountain once gives me a little bit more of just like, I know what is in store for me and how I want to feel at different places. I think,
but it's okay if you don't feel.
Yeah. It's, and recognizing like, this is a really hard challenge. Like I'm in a sense, like kind of terrified of running around that whole thing and those last 3 climbs that are so challenging.
But the execution part of things is your wheelhouse, man. Like there are a few people that execute hundreds better than you, even if there are people who are more talented than you, like your calm, your demeanor, your experience, like you're very good at this stuff. So it begs the question now, if execution is the main variable or the main, determinant of success, like how might Tyler approach this in terms of strategy and style? Are we going to see the old Tyler Green who comes from behind, or are we going to see Tyler Green mixing it up early?
It's got to be some sort of balance between the two. I get in tune with my central governor quite a bit in terms of like, how am I going to spread this thing as evenly as possible over the piece of bread? And I want to approach every race as like, you can run fast in certain sections, you can run slower in other sections. I don't know what your strategy is. My strategy is just to get from the start line to the finish line as fast as I can in whatever way that works for me. And I think that probably means like, I think I came into Les Contamines or into Les Houches and like 70th, maybe into Les Contamines at like 50th or something like that last year. And I think I'll probably need to get going a little bit faster just to kind of get into that, the flow of racers a little bit more and to feel that energy a little bit more and simultaneously like just go into it with a lot of calm, knowing that I have a long ways to go. I'm good buds with David Laney, and I just loved the way that he placed third in 2016, 15, by just charging those last 3 climbs. That's a really hard thing to do. I think I'd like to be up a little bit further than that and trying to just hold on to it.
Yeah. I recall I was doing the commentary that year, and it was before they had the cameras on the runners, like for the whole, the duration of the last 50K more or less. So we were only getting updates mostly from the aid stations where we would get cameras on the runners. And it was just so crazy to see Dave Laney come back through. I'm sure you can find some of that stuff on YouTube to get inspired here in the last couple of weeks. Well, guys, it's so great to chat again and catch up a little bit. We're going to be over there a week from today too. So looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, looking
soon. I hope the last couple of weeks in training go smoothly. I'm going to ask you guys both a quick closing question, then we can wrap up. That question being, who is one person you admire inside or outside of sport? Can be living or dead. And why do you admire that person? Rachel, we'll start with you.
Ooh. Can Tyler start actually?
Tyler, you can go first.
Think.
Yeah, I mean, you did prep us for this, Rachel.
I know.
Gotta do your homework. You're a student. Come on, you know these things. I'm gonna go with Brian Doyle, who's an incredible author. He has passed away not too long ago with brain cancer, but the reason that I'm just so smitten, I'm like, he's an incredible thinker and just has this playful way of writing and communicating that has this wonderment in the world and is simultaneously like incredibly deep. And it's not just the thinking, but as far as I understand of who he is, he like lived out that kind of that way of being as well. And to live it out is probably the hard part. You can think all sorts of amazing things and not live it, but he definitely lived it. So go with Brian Doyle.
What's a book that he's written?
My favorite is Martin. It's a story of a
dude. Harmony is reading that right now. I can't believe you brought that up. That is amazing.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
I was making fun of her about it. I was like, what is this? It's like a book about like some kind of rodent, isn't it?
No, it's a mustelid. It's like it's the family of the weasel and the skunk and the otter and the badger and the wolverine. It's a
not
martin,
a rodent,
pine marten.
Dylan.
So yeah, it's a story. It's a boy and a marten, and they just like simultaneously live these lives up in a little town, in the little town of Zigzag, Oregon, which is right near where our family cabin is. So there's some connection there, and it's just these stories of like this little town and the different characters within it and their struggles and stuff. And yeah, it's so good. There's that. Mink River is the other one, which is a coastal town in Oregon. So I love my Oregon authors. Yeah. And then if you want to like a really great one, just open up One Long River of Song. It's his like essays that he wrote. I believe like he just went on, he was diagnosed with cancer. He went on an absolute tear, just writing books and essays and poems and everything that he possibly could. And this is his like posthumous work that another Oregon author helped publish for him, David James Duncan, who I'm kind of nerding out here. But if you open up that book and like the first 3 pages will have you in tears immediately. And from there, you'll love Brian Doyle and want to read all of his other stuff.
Unbelievable. Thank you for that. I'm going to go look at some of this stuff and maybe I'll pull that book from Harmony when she's finished up with it. Yes. So Martin, Rachel Drake, who's one person to admire?
That was perfect. Gave me some time to think. I'm going to go with a different Brian that actually cured cancer. This is Brian Drucker from OHSU. He's a cancer researcher and he developed a drug called Gleevec or imatinib that's just saved hundreds of thousands of lives. We actually met him at a bookstore on the Oregon coast. And I was like, Brian Drucker, hi. Like, I'm such a fan. He was like, oh, I'm just getting a book here for my wife. So I've met him a couple of times. Like he's given talks on campus and he's just such a down to earth guy. And in terms of of having an impact on the world, I cannot think of anything more impactful than what he's done and continues to do, in cancer research. And I think like just being a good human on top of that is just incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, what a great way to end it. 2 now things for me to go look into and research here after our conversation. But thank you both for coming back on the show. I hope Lewis is sleeping soundly and peacefully, and look forward to seeing you both over there in Europe in a couple of weeks.
Thanks,
we
Dylan.
love you, Dylan.
Yeah, love you. Good to see you.